They said the street was quiet, as if silence always meant safety. But that night on the corner of Holloway and Birch, silence was the first betrayal. Serena Hayes stood beneath a flickering street lamp outside a shuttered florist shop, the screen of her phone glowing softly against the fading dusk. The wind pulled at the edge of her navy blue trench coat. She didn't fidget, didn't pace, just checked her Jeeps, double-checked her bus route, and waited. A woman alone on a sidewalk, a civilian, a citizen. Yet for Officer Derek Vaughn, that image didn't compute. His cruiser rolled to a stop across the street. The engine hummed low, like a warning not yet spoken. He didn't step out at first, just watched, evaluating, or maybe profiling. When he finally crossed over, his boots echoed too loudly in the stillness, each step a claim of authority rather than concern. "Evening," he said, flashlight already pointed in her eyes. "You lost?" Serena didn't blink. "No, sir, just checking directions." His flashlight didn't move. "Can I see some ID?" She lowered her phone slowly. "Have I done something wrong?" There it was, that question. Not angry, not defiant, just clear. But to Officer Vaughn, it was enough. His jaw tightened. "You're standing in front of a closed business. That makes you suspicious." Serena tilted her head slightly. "Is standing on a public sidewalk now illegal?" His voice rose a notch. "Ma'am, don't play games with me. ID, now." She reached into her coat pocket, deliberate, visible, careful, and retrieved her wallet. Before she could offer it, he grabbed her arm. It wasn't hard at first, but it was meant to claim control. "Don't make this harder than it needs to be," he snapped. She didn't resist, not then. She just said quietly, "Please let go." But that wasn't the story he would tell later. That night, Serena Hayes was arrested for resisting an officer and assaulting a member of law enforcement. Officer Vaughn claimed she became aggressive, shouted obscenities, and tried to grab his weapon, said she was a threat, said he feared for his life. There was no security footage. His body cam, he claimed, malfunctioned. And within hours, Serena was booked, charged, and scheduled for arraignment. To the public eye, she was just another name on the docket, another incident. But something was off. At the first hearing, she sat calmly beside her attorney, Jordan Miles, a fresh-faced graduate from Howard Law with only 3 prior trials under his belt. His hand shook slightly as he leafed through the case file. The police report was airtight. The officer was decorated. The prosecution was confident. And the court, so far, seemed unconcerned. But Serena? She sat with the stillness of someone who had seen storms far greater than this one. Back straight, chin level, eyes scanning the courtroom, not with fear, but with precision. Jordan leaned in and whispered, "There's no video. Nothing we can use yet. I need something. Anything." Serena didn't respond at first. Then quietly she said, "The truth doesn't always come first, Jordan, but it comes." That answer frustrated him, but he nodded, trusted, waited. Across the aisle, Officer Vaughn sat with a confidence Jordan found nauseating. His uniform was pressed to perfection, his demeanor cool, composed, and self-assured. He glanced at Serena briefly, but there was no flicker of hesitation in his stare, only calculation. The court adjourned early that day. The judge, Eloise Rankin, called for both counsels to prepare for full testimony the next morning. As the room emptied, Jordan turned to Serena. "You don't act like someone who's fighting for her freedom." She stood, calmly smoothing the sleeves of her coat. "Because I've fought for bigger things." He followed her gaze out the courthouse window, where the sky was already turning orange with the late evening sun. He didn't know then what she meant, but tomorrow the courtroom would. And Officer Vaughn, smug, untouchable, backed by a system that had always believed him, would finally meet the one thing he couldn't control, a woman trained to read danger before it struck, a soldier who knew how to fight without lifting a single hand, a storm wrapped in silence. Her name was Serena Hayes, and this wasn't just another case. This was the beginning of an unraveling. The next morning arrived with a sky of flat gray, like the world itself hadn't made up its mind. Inside courtroom 3C, everything looked as it should. The polished benches, the hum of overhead lights, the quiet shuffle of paper against wood. But beneath the order was something volatile, unseen, waiting. Jordan Miles adjusted his tie with a nervous flick. His suit, pressed the night before with precision, now felt like armor too heavy for a battle he didn't understand. Serena Hayes sat beside him, composed. Her expression is unreadable. Again. At 9:03 a.m., Judge Eloise Rankin entered. All rise. Her voice was clipped, practiced, and unimpressed. She glanced briefly at both sides, then down at the file in front of her. Let's begin. The prosecution rose first. Richard Niles, with his tailored suit and predator's smile, addressed the jury with measured calm. Ladies and gentlemen, what we have is a case of defiance turned dangerous. Officer Derek Vaughn responded to a disturbance. He encountered a civilian, gave clear instructions. I was met with hostility. The result? Physical resistance, an attempt to reach for a service weapon, and a necessary arrest. He turned towards Serena, voice lowering slightly. This is not about race. It's about respect. Respect for law, respect for order. Jordan flinched inwardly at the line. He had heard it before. So had Serena. The prosecutor called Officer Vaughn to the stand. Derek Vaughn walked with casual control, the kind earned from years of never being questioned. The courtroom watched him like it had watched so many men in blue before him. Habitual reverence, not earned but expected. He raised his right hand, swore the oath, and sat. Jordan leaned forward, watching closely, not the words, but the hands, the blink rate, the mouth movements. Serena had warned him, watch how he adjusts when no one's asking him to. Vaughn spoke with ease. I responded to a potential break-in, found the defendant outside a closed florist shop, asked her for identification. She refused, raised her voice. When I tried to calm her, she struck my chest with her forearm and moved toward my holster. That's when I had to act. He paused, feigned discomfort, shifted his weight slightly, just enough to seem human. She was loud, confrontational, threatening. Jordan glanced at Serena. She didn't blink. Thank you, Officer Vaughn, the prosecutor said smoothly, turning toward the judge. And no further questions. Defense? Judge Rankin asked without looking up. Jordan stood slowly. His shoes clicked softly against the polished floor. All eyes on him, but he felt only one gaze mattered. Serena's. He exhaled once and approached the stand. Officer Vaughn, you said Ms. Hayes was aggressive. Did you file a use of force report? Yes. Did your body camera capture the incident? Vaughn hesitated just long enough. It malfunctioned. Battery issue. Jordan raised an eyebrow. Was that logged? It was. Can we see the log? That's for the department's internal. I'll subpoena it, Jordan cut in, his voice firmer than expected. Judge Rankin raised an eyebrow but said nothing. Jordan paced slowly. Officer Vaughn, how long have you served? 13 years. How many arrests have you made without body cam footage? Vaughn shifted. Not many. Approximately? Maybe 2, 3. And how many of those incidents involve black women who questioned your orders? Objection. The prosecutor shot to his feet. Relevance, Your Honor. Judge Rankin glanced at Jordan, then nodded. Sustained. Rephrase. Jordan didn't blink. No further questions. At this time. He returned to his table, sat, reached for water but didn't drink it. Serena leaned toward him, voice low, steady. You see it now? Jordan nodded. "He's too polished," he whispered. "He's been here too many times." "Exactly," Serena murmured. "And systems love men like that." The prosecution rested its case. Judge Rankin called for a recess before the defense could begin. As people stood to leave, the courtroom filled with low murmurs. Journalists scribbled. Spectators whispered. Vaughn walked past Jordan's table with a smug tilt of the head, but not toward Jordan, toward Serena. And that was his second mistake, because Serena Hayes didn't play to the room. She studied it, read it like a battlefield. And tomorrow she would walk back into it not as a defendant, but as the beginning of its undoing. The courtroom on day 3 was a different place. Not physically. The wood was still polished. The seal of justice is still carved above the judge's bench. But there was a current now, subtle but undeniable, the kind that hums in a room just before thunder breaks. Serena Hayes walked in first, flanked by her attorney Jordan Miles. She wore the same calm expression, but something had changed. Her movements were slower, heavier, not with doubt, but with deliberate weight. Like every step had a purpose, like every second was building to something. Jordan was ready, or at least as ready as someone could be with only half the truth in a client who still hadn't shown her hand. But she had promised, "You'll know when it's time." And now he felt it. Judge Rankin entered, her robe swaying slightly as she sat down and scanned the courtroom. "Defense," she said, tone sharp. "You may proceed." Jordan rose, adjusted his cuffs, and cleared his throat. "The defense would like to call Serena Hayes to the stand." The courtroom murmured. Serena stood. She moved with control, not the stiff, forced kind that came from fear, but the poised grace of someone who knew pressure intimately. She sat, swore the oath, and adjusted the microphone without once breaking eye contact with the judge. Jordan approached. "Ms. Hayes," he began, "you've heard Officer Vaughn's account of your arrest. You've seen the charges filed against you. Resisting arrest, attempted assault, obstruction. Are any of these true?" "No," she said, simply, unshaken. "Then please," Jordan continued, stepping aside so the jury had a clear view, "tell the court, in your own words, what happened that night." Serena took a breath, not for composure, but for precision. "I was leaving a friend's house. I stopped outside a flower shop to check my phone. It was late, quiet. Then Officer Vaughn pulled up, got out, and aimed his flashlight in my face. No greeting, no reason, just suspicion." She paused. "He asked for ID. I asked why. I wasn't breaking any laws. I wasn't trespassing. I was standing on a sidewalk." That question alone seemed to offend him. Jordan nodded. "Did you refuse to provide ID?" "I asked for a reason first. Before I could finish, he grabbed my arm." A stir from the back row. One of Vaughn's fellow officers shifted uncomfortably. Serena continued, voice even. "I said, please let go." He didn't. He tightened his grip and said, "Women like you need to learn how to listen." The room froze. Judge Rankin leaned forward slightly. "Are you certain of that phrasing?" Jordan asked. Serena didn't blink. "I don't forget threats, Mr. Miles, especially the quiet ones." Jordan turned to the jury. "Did you fight back, Miss Hayes?" "No, I tried to pull my arm away. That's when he slammed me against the patrol car and put me in cuffs." "Did you reach for his weapon?" "No." "Did you strike him?" "No." Jordan walked slowly back to the defense table, picked up a small USB drive, and held it up. "Your Honor, the defense would like to introduce new video evidence, footage taken by a bystander who witnessed the arrest." Richard Niles, the prosecutor, stood abruptly. "Objection. This evidence was not submitted during discovery." "Overruled," Judge Rankin said, her eyes now locked on the screen being wheeled in. The footage played. It was shaky, taken from inside a car, but the audio was clear. Vaughn's voice rang out. "Don't make this harder than it needs to be." Serena's voice, I'm not resisting. Let go of my arm. Then unmistakably Vaughn, women like you don't get to question me. Gasps. One juror's pen slipped from their fingers and clattered onto the bench. When the video ended, the room was dead silent. Judge Rankin leaned back in her chair, lips pressed thin. Richard Niles no longer stood so tall, and Officer Vaughn, seated stiffly at the plaintiff's table, looked as though someone had pulled the oxygen from his lungs. Jordan spoke quietly. No further questions. Serena stepped down. She didn't gloat. She didn't smirk. She simply returned to her seat like a soldier leaving a field not yet cleared of mines. As the court recessed, Jordan turned to her. "You've fought before," he whispered. Serena's reply was quiet but unshakable. "Not like this. But I've always known how to survive the lie long enough to make room for the truth." Outside, the sky was darker now, but inside that courtroom, the truth had just begun to shine. The courtroom, once a shrine to routine procedure, now breathed like a living thing. Every silence was heavier. Every glance is sharper. The tape had shifted everything. Yet the real weight hadn't fallen. Not yet. Jordan Miles sat at the defense table, quietly reviewing his next move. His hands didn't shake this time. The storm had broken through the walls, and now all that remained was to steer it. Beside him, Serena Hayes sat steady, still not triumphant, still not rattled, just present, like someone who had lived through worse and simply refused to flinch. Across the aisle, Officer Derek Vaughn was unraveling. The once certain posture had been replaced by stiff shoulders and darting eyes. He whispered to his counsel, his voice tight and low, as if secrecy could still protect him. But the jury had seen something, and what they saw could not be unseen. Judge Eloise Rankin called the room back to order. Her gaze swept across the courtroom, sharper than before. "Mr. Miles," she said, "proceed." Jordan stood with a new steadiness and lifted a folder from his briefcase, aged, thick, sealed with a small paper tab. "Your Honor, the defense would like to introduce supplementary documentation. The internal conduct file of Officer Derek Vaughn." Niles was up in an instant. "Objection, relevance, and procedural timing." Judge Rankin didn't even raise her hand this time. "He's already impeached himself. Let's hear it." Jordan opened the folder. Throughout his 13-year career, he began pacing slowly before the jury. Officer Vaughn has faced 7 internal complaints, 3 for excessive force, 2 for racially motivated language, 1 for unlawful detainment, 1, ironically, for falsifying details in an arrest report. He handed out copies to the jury, not dramatizing, just stating. All were marked as insufficient evidence or quietly closed. No disciplinary action was taken. He stopped, turned to the jury, and so he continued. Richard Niles scrambled. "Your Honor, these are accusations, not convictions." "And neither is Ms. Hayes," Jordan shot back. "But she was cuffed and slammed into a patrol car based on one accusation. Without video, without resistance, without a voice." He turned back toward the stand, then to Serena. "Would you like to say something, Ms. Hayes?" Serena stood, not called, but with quiet permission. She walked slowly to the center of the courtroom, not to the stand. She didn't need elevation to be heard. "My name is Serena Hayes," she said clearly, her voice low but carrying. "I served in the United States Marine Corps for over 20 years. I was a reconnaissance operations officer, trained in tactical discipline, de-escalation, and threat assessment." She turned to the jury. "The night I was arrested, I didn't see a threat. I saw a man who expected obedience because of a badge. I've seen that before. Overseas, in hostile zones. Only there, it wore a different uniform." She faced the judge next. "I didn't resist that night because I'm afraid. I didn't resist because I'm trained not to. I didn't fight back, not because I couldn't, but because I knew what would happen if I did. Not to me, but to the story. Silence. Even Judge Rankin was still. I was never meant to speak, Serena said. People like me rarely are. But I learned something in the military. The mission doesn't always need noise. Sometimes it needs a strategy, timing, precision. She turned finally to Officer Vaughn. You thought I was just another problem, but I'm a pattern reader, and I see yours. She returned to her seat, slowly without spectacles. Jordan exhaled quietly. She had just changed the entire shape of the trial, not with defense, but with exposure. He stood again. We're not here because of one bad night, he said, voice rising slightly. We're here because too many nights like this happen, and too few ever make it this far. Today, someone finally said, enough. The gallery didn't applaud. No one dared. But the shift was tangible. Across the room, Vaughn's face was pale. He looked smaller now, not by camera angles or shadows, but because truth, when it lands, makes men shrink if they were never standing on it to begin with. As the court recessed again, Jordan turned to Serena and whispered, "It's working." She replied, not with relief, but clarity. "No, it's only the beginning." The hallway outside courtroom 3C felt colder than it had all week. Not because of the weather, but because this was the moment justice paused to take a breath before speaking. Inside, the jury had deliberated for over 2 hours. Every passing minute had tightened the knot in Jordan Miles's chest. He paced slowly beside a bench, documents still clutched in one hand, though there was nothing left to argue. Across from him, Serena Hayes sat still, shoulders square, hands folded neatly, as if she were back on base waiting for the next command. But her eyes never left the door. Jordan broke the silence. "Do you think they got it?" She didn't look at him, just replied quietly and sharply, "I think they felt it." The doors opened. The bailiff stepped out. The jury has reached a verdict. The world slowed. Inside, the courtroom was full, more than in any previous day. Journalists, legal interns, and community organizers, faces from all sides of the city, some hoping, some fear, some simply watching history at the edge of their seat. Serena rose, Jordan walked beside her, Judge Rankin re-entered, her face unreadable, and gestured for all to be seated. The foreperson, a middle-aged woman with streaks of gray in her tightly pulled-back hair, stood slowly. In the matter of state of Commonwealth versus Serena Hayes, we, the jury, find the defendant. A heartbeat. Not guilty on all charges. Gasps filled the room. One person in the gallery let out a quiet yes under their breath. Jordan closed his eyes for just a second and then turned to Serena, whose expression had not changed. Calm, resolved. Like she had always known, this was the only possible outcome for the truth. But the foreperson wasn't done. We further recommend that an internal investigation be launched into the conduct and record of Officer Derek Vaughn. The room erupted into whispers. Judge Rankin banged her gavel, though even her voice had softened as she turned to the prosecutor. "Mr. Niles, this matter will not be dismissed lightly. I expect full cooperation from the department." Officer Vaughn, seated stiffly at the front, didn't move. His face was stone, but his hand, white-knuckled around the arms of the chair, revealed everything. His wall had cracked. The silence he had long depended on had shattered. The court was adjourned, but the real verdict had been cast far earlier. Outside, the steps of the courthouse were already swarmed, microphones pointed, cameras flashing. But Serena didn't race toward the crowd. She walked slowly, deliberately, stopping only when Jordan touched her arm gently. "You don't have to talk to them if you don't want to." "I know, but I think you should." She nodded once and turned. The crowd fell quiet. No speechwriter, no slogans, just her voice. "I didn't win today," Serena began, her tone clear and steady, "because I'm a veteran. I didn't win because I had a lawyer who believed in me, or because a video happened to survive. She paused, letting the silence stretch. I won because I didn't stay silent. She looked into the cameras, into every lens, trying to capture her face. This isn't just about me. It's about every person who's ever been told their truth isn't loud enough, who's been cornered, disrespected, and erased by someone in uniform or someone behind a desk. Let this moment be proof that silence doesn't mean surrender, and justice doesn't belong to one side of a badge. She stepped down from the makeshift podium. Jordan followed. They didn't look back. Epilogue. 3 months later, Officer Vaughn was formally dismissed from the force. An internal audit exposed not just his conduct, but a broader culture of protectionism that allowed it. Serena Hayes was invited to speak at the National Forum on Law and Ethics, though she turned down several other offers for interviews, book deals, and pundit seats. She chose instead to start a quiet initiative, Echo Witness, a legal fund and veteran-run mentorship network for those wrongfully arrested or silenced. Jordan Miles became one of its first board members. And in her modest home, tucked behind a row of oak trees, Serena kept one frame on her wall, her Marine insignia beside the court transcript's final line. Not guilty. A verdict, but also a reminder. Lesson learned. The truth doesn't need to shout. It just needs to survive long enough to be heard. Serena Hayes' story reminds us that justice is not won in a single day, and it doesn't always roar in the moment of harm. It moves slowly through cracks in the system, carried by the dignity of those who choose not to fight with fists, but with memory, restraint, and unshakable clarity. We live in a world where silence is too often mistaken for compliance, but sometimes silence is a strategy. And when the time comes, when truth finally walks into the room, no amount of badges or lies can stand against it. Because the system may lie, but the body remembers, and justice listens.